Hey y'all, so welcome to Poli-Side-Eye. It's been a while. It is May.
It's gonna be May.
I wanted to say it, but I was like, your birthday is like tomorrow, or I feel like when this airs, it's gonna be your birthday.
Yeah, the only reason I even remembered my birthday was coming up is because I got an email from ASOS with a coupon, and I was like, "Oh fuck, my birthday is next week."
How
But
much is the coupon?
10% off. It's
Oh
not.
Lord. Are you gonna do anything?
Probably not because it's a race against the clock for me to get this dissertation turned in. So that's gonna be preoccupying me pretty much until I turn it in. So
Oh, well, you
I'll
can.
celebrate once I'm done.
Okay, June 3rd. Okay, I'm probably gonna buy you a bottle of champagne or something because you deserve it.
Yeah, thank you.
So this episode was your idea, this topic. So you're going to be in charge more so of guiding this conversation. But I will preface this with a tweet that you sent that started this whole idea. Yeah, so you said, has anyone written anything critiquing the music festival industry? And by critique, I mean a systematic examination of its constitutive elements. That is such a Jared tweet. So I'm just wondering, how does it relate to politics at hand? Like, just elaborate.
Okay, so first I'm gonna ask you a question. How many music festivals can you think of off the top of your head now?
Um, a lot.
Right,
Like
you got Coachella,
Coachella,
Lollapalooza, you got
Lollapalooza,
Governor's Ball, got Jazz Festival, you got Something's in the Water, Pharrell's new festival, you got Roots Picnic, you got Broccoli Fest, you got Dreamville Fest, you got Bonnaroo.
Burning Man.
Right, exactly. And so like so many of these festivals are also really new, i.e. like within the last like 5 or 6 years. But even like post-COVID, you're starting to see like even these smaller festivals. Like I saw there was a Blue Note Jazz Fest. And so I was just like, there's so many damn festivals. Like what's going on? Before it used to just kind of be, Coachella and then to a lesser extent Lollapalooza. Then you had like, Jazz Fest has a history, but like what is going on, like why are there so many of them? And so I've been thinking about this for a while because I went to Dreamville Fest. So if you're not familiar, Dreamville Fest is a 2-day music festival that started in Raleigh, North Carolina, which
J.
is
Cole. Right?
right. Yeah, exactly. It's J. Cole's festival. So it started the year before COVID. So the first one was in 2019, but it started off as like a very small 1 day. I think they only had maybe about 10 or 12 acts. And now it's ballooned into like this 2-day thing. And I think the tickets for the 2-day festival were like $250, and like all of the bells and whistles that you'll get at like the major ones. And so I'm like, okay, Raleigh is not it's not like a touristy spot. So it's just like, it doesn't necessarily have a reputation of being like a musical city. So I'm like, you know, what's going on? So when I was there, I started paying attention to a lot of, part of it is because I had an edible. So, when I have an edible, I'm like really conscious of my surroundings. So I started like looking around to see it. I'm like, there's so many sponsorships. Like you see all of these different like JP Morgan, you got all these different alcohol vendors with sponsorships, you got all these other retail stores and stuff. And then I'm like, what is going on? Like, why are there so many businesses like interested in this industry? And then this is all happening at the same time that you're hearing all about how streaming is killing the music industry. So I just feel like there's a lot kind of happening in kind of at the same time or in tandem that I think needs to be examined a little bit closer. And then on top of all that, like the way that social media is like immersed, or people immerse themselves in these festivals almost to use it as a way to like display their own kind of personalities through social media. And then the way that retailers have like built upon it. So when I was using the ASOS app, they had a whole section dedicated to get your festival gear, like all of this like marketing, especially for like the festival season. So I'm just like, what is going on here? Like there has to be something bigger structural going on. And and so that's what I've been trying to think about. Like, what is the festival industry doing? And like, why now? Like, why now is it exploding? So that's kind of where I was when I tweeted about that.
Okay, I'm trying to think like in early 2000s were there like festivals like that?
There were some, so you had some. So you had like, I think Bonnaroo is a somewhat older one. But now, so I found this article this came out in 2019. It was in Time magazine. And so the title of the article was How Music Festivals Became a Massive Business in the 50 Years Since Woodstock. So it's this whole like article in Time, and they say, so it came out in 2019. So they say within the last decade, music festivals have grown into a major moneymaker in a competitive industry that sees hundreds of such events each year in the US. And they go on to say there's big ones like Coachella, Lollapalooza, whatever, but there's also been, they say, hundreds of smaller niche or genre-specific festivals that have also flourished. Look up music festival near me and you're likely to find one within a few hours drive. So this has turned into a whole industry. It's not just like, a sprinkling of them here or there, like the big ones, but again, there's like these smaller festivals that just kind of popped up. And so I'm just kind of like, what's going on? And then on top of that, it's almost like, with rare exceptions, like it's generally the same set of artists who are just kind of bouncing from festival to festival. So the lineups themselves, with the exception of a few, like Coachella typically gets artists that, like Beyonce is not going to Dreamville Fest. Like Coachella typically gets kind of the cream of the crop. But if you below that, the lineups, if you look at them, are pretty similar.
Very.
So I'm like, okay, so what's the market for this? Like, is there that much of a market to where it's not just the same kind of group of people that are just hopping from festival to festival? Like, obviously that can't be the case because there's not that many people, I think, that could afford to go to, 3 and 4 and 5 festivals a year. So, which means that there's a pretty big market for it. And so I'm always wondering if there's a big market for something, like, A, how is that market being created? And like B, like, how are businesses responding to that market? And I think that, I think there's a lot there to think about.
I feel like Meg Thee Stallion is at every single festival.
Yeah, she is.
Lil Baby.
Right.
It was Da Baby at one point.
Until he got...
Yeah, Travis Scott at one point was everywhere.
J. Cole was at Dreamville Fest, and I saw he was going to be at Lollapalooza. I think he was at another one too, because he just had this new Dreamville record that came out. I know like Kehlani has been on quite a few of them. So yeah, it's just kind of, what's going on? Like, there has to be something. When I start seeing things systematically happening, that indicates to me that there has to be something bigger going on. Yeah.
I mean, I think with some artists, how the music industry isn't that profitable anymore. Like, you need to be selling something aside from music to even make a profit these days. And artists, they have to tour to make money. So if they get like an easy, venue where they can just show up for like a day and make that quick 20, 50K, 100K without even having to go on tour to commit, like, hey, I would do that if I was an artist. So I think more artists are doing that. Now with festivals, like, you didn't go to Day in Vegas, right?
See, that's a good one too. There you go. That didn't exist 10 years ago.
Right. I like that all of my favorite artists are in one venue, so I won't have to see them separately. But I think I'd rather see them separately in a more intimate situation, because you have like me and 10,000 other people. It's too crowded. You have a long ass day from 11 o'clock, maybe to like 11 p.m. I don't want to be out there that long. Like, Coachella does not seem fun to me anymore at all.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is I'm like, I need a seat. So I'm just like, even standing room only venues, I'm just kind of like, give me.
And then the prices. It starts at $300. And then you have VIP, which can be $600 to $1,200, sometimes $2,000. For what?
But the thing is, now you can finance them, because before you used to have to pay up front.
Credit.
Right. Now you can finance it. So that makes me, okay, let's think about like the structural component. So you made a good point. So you brought up one major stakeholder, which is the artist. So it makes sense. Like, if you can just like pop up, like you don't have to deal with, planning how, I mean, unless you're Beyonce, who creates like this whole big production, but most people don't do that. Like, they just have 2 jumbotrons, maybe a little, kind of a little pathway or walkway to the stage. But I mean, more or less, it's just a stage that they use for everybody. So you don't have to deal with all of the logistics and all of the planning of like all that stuff. But then, okay, so one of the major stakeholders is the artist. So I'm thinking like, who else has a stake in this festival industry? You know, so there's these whole like organizations that are dedicated solely to planning and essentially set up and managing like the day-to-day operations of the festival. So for instance, for Dreamville Fest, you know, they hired a vendor who comes and, you know, pretty much there's similar vendors like Live Nation has a subsidiary, like AEG, I think it's called. But there's like a handful of vendors who now they have a whole division set up to just festivals. So they hired contractors to essentially do the setup of it. And then even the people who run the like the merchandise, a lot of that is run through the organization too. But because it's contract work, you don't have to worry about unionization. You don't have to worry about paying people a ton. So you can do this without spending that much on labor costs, which is good if you are a festival organ, like let's say J. Cole, for instance, because then you don't have to worry about all the logistics stuff. Like you can just have this organization handle all of that. And so, okay, so then you have this business model, so the AG Live or whatever it's called, who is, you know, banking on this. So then let's talk about the financing. So we talked about the fact that you can finance your tickets now. That means that you have now another stakeholder in banks. So I think for Dreamville Fest, you could finance it through, I want to say Wells Fargo. I want to say that was the main vendor. So then you have these stakeholders who are like, oh, well, I can get in on it too by like, you know, using this financing scheme. So then you got that. But then you have all these sponsorship deals. So then you got Ciroc, all these different liquor brands who cut these sponsorship deals with the festival, who are guaranteed a slice of the profits of the festival. So you got that. And then other stakeholders that aren't directly involved with the festival itself, like ASOS and Forever 21 and all of these other retailers. Also, they get a bump too, because all these people, like I said earlier, are buying this festival merch because they're being marketed that in the ASOS app. So I'll just look at it like there's so many people that, and none of this has anything at all to do with the music. None of it. It's all about
the main point of it isn't the music, it's profit.
Right. But then, so the question is, why is it that there's a market for it? If so let's think about the paradox. If music is, almost everyone universally is in agreement that contemporary music is declining insofar as like consumption habits go. Now we can debate about the quality of it. I mean, I know how you feel about it, but from a consumption standpoint, music consumption is more people are streaming old shit than they are the new shit. So why are people dying to go to festivals if they aren't necessarily consuming the music in ways that they used to, at least not in ways that we would expect for at this moment? So that's contradictory to me. So what is it that people are getting then out of festivals?
I mean, I can speak from a couple people's perspective. I mean, you're looking for an experience. There's another festival coming up. It's Lovers and Friends. And that's like the entire 2000s. Like you saw the list, right? The bragging aspect of it, like, look where I am. I'm in this whole experience right now. I got to document it. I got to be there. There's fear of missing out. And you just want to be there at all costs. And if you don't have the money, I mean, you can finance it. Like, I'm guessing if you have to travel, you can finance flights now from Klarna. Do you think they're trying to put more people in debt or just find more ways to in-debt people?
So that's a good question. So this could be my book recommendation for today. So the name of the book is called, you can't really say, it's called Limits of Capital. And I'll send you the link. So in this book, it's by a Marxist geographer named David Harvey. And so all of his research is essentially thinking about capitalist development. So, you know, he makes this case that part of how capitalism works is it always has to grow. Like it has to grow, which means it always has to find new markets. And if there aren't markets that already exist, you have to create them. And so I'm always thinking about, well, how are new markets being created? In one new market, I think that it's being created is this festival industry market. And so I'm wondering, like, you know, what is it about this that people then find appealing in ways that they are willing to spend, let's say $300 or $350 for a 3-day festival to see people that maybe a handful of people that they care about, but more or less, like you said, people aren't necessarily going for the music, they're going for the spectacle, and they're going so they can buy their ASOS festival gear and then post it on Instagram and with their shades and with the hashtags and with the Coachella backdrop.
Like Coachella is basically like the Met Gala for influencers.
Exactly. So then that's another stakeholder, like the influencers. So that if you go to Coachella, you're going to go to an event that's all about the spectacle. Okay, so you're keeping track of the stakeholders. So you have the artists, because you can hop in, get your check and leave. You got all of the financial firms who are participating in the financing of it, but not only financing ticket holders, but they're also helping finance the festivals themselves. So I was reading about Dreamville too, like essentially the way that Dreamville got the money, they essentially cut deals with, I want to say it was, again, Wells Fargo, that it finances the event. And so they're indebted to Wells Fargo, which is part of the reason they have to really push like merchandise sales, and they charge you $18. Like they were charging us like $18 for a drink. Like a basic gin and tonic type situation. So everything is just like costs are just through the roof, and people are just eating it up. So I'm just wondering, like, what is it about the experience of festival going itself that people are so drawn to? And then I think the question then becomes, is this a permanent market, or do we think it's just a fad?
I don't think it's going to be a fad. It seems like there's incentives for all parties involved. And I mean, somebody's making money. I mean, except for the consumer, like we're paying money for an experience, and then in turn you have the artists making money, you have the banks making money, the corporations with the sponsors, the vendors there. So it seems like everyone is profiting, I guess, except the consumer. But what should happen then? Like, what is there a problem here?
Again, I was thinking critique, and so there's like a very specific definition of critique, like in theory. So critique in a kind of theoretical sense is just you are trying to dissect a concept or an idea or a process or an event, so you can just understand why it happens, how it continues to happen, and kind of all of its parts. So I wasn't necessarily critiquing it from I'm not like hating on it. Although I feel like I phased out of the festival phase of my life. So I was more so just interested in what it was about festivals that have made them explode so much, especially in the last like 5 to 10 years, and increasingly so kind of now, I guess, in post-COVID. So that's what I was thinking about more than anything else. But I'm glad that you mentioned this point about like people are paying for an experience, because one thing that that Harvey talks about in the book is the way that experience or creating or selling experiences has become one of the preferred methods of production for businesses now, because you essentially don't have to worry about producing anything. Like the commodity is the time that people then spend at this event, but you don't have to worry about like actually what they call fixed capital. So spending money on a structure or spending money on some type of like huge thing. So the production costs are close to none. I mean, you pay for the stage, and I mean, but that is a fraction of what you pay if you were actually producing something tangible. So that is like a surefire way to increase your profit margins. So I'm just curious to know, like, if we think about where music is right now, in the sense that people aren't consuming music the way that they, not only qualitatively are not consuming it the way they used to, but the amount of music that people consume is less now. Oh, well, new music. So people are consuming a lot of music, but there was a really good article about this. I want to say it was in the Atlantic, where people are consuming a lot of music, but it's old shit. So what happens 10 or 15 years down the line where really nobody's listening to new shit? Are they just going to keep pulling out Jay-Z and Ashanti, who was one of the headliners at Dreamville Fest? And I think they've also gone to a few other festivals. And are they going to pull out like T-Pain, who was also in or Pharrell? Are they going to just keep wheeling out these older artists because that's who people are listening to. It's just curious to me to think about the explosion of festivals at a time where music itself is in decline.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a rise in nostalgia in our generation. We know that some of our like favorite artists aren't really making music anymore, but some of them are still going on tour. You know, like Maya is everywhere, just for example.
Okay, so to take that logic a step further, 30 years down the line or 20 years down the line, do you think people are going to be feeling that same way about Lil Baby?
Maybe. There really has been a rise in festivals. You're right. COVID almost stopped all of that, but I'm thinking, you know, COVID can't stop capitalism. Capitalism is just going to thrive.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it's going to thrive until it destroys the world, which is going to happen at some point. But I mean, just being real. But yeah, so I don't know. Like, but do you think this is just like a post-COVID, everyone wants to be out of the house moment?
I think the powers that be know that as well. And I definitely remember myself saying that when this is all over or lockdown is over, I am never going to take outside for granted ever again. And yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe they're capitalizing off of that. Maybe that's why. And then it's hard to make money off of music these days for artists. So artists have that incentive as much as the fans do.
So do you think people are still going to be flocking to all these festivals 5 years from now once the post-COVID I want to be out the house moment has passed? Or do you think this is a flash in the pan? That's what I'm curious about. Like, is this something that's truly a structural change? Or is it just the reason that music festivals are a thing now because people are so nostalgic for music from the 90s, early 2000s?
It might be. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I know our generation might age out of festivals. I mean, you know, we're going to be too old to do it, but the new generation will fill in, and then the generation after them. So maybe festivals have a chance.
So one last question. Why didn't they have hundreds of festivals in the 1980s?
I'm guessing it was just the time. I mean, I'm sure technology is a factor as well. Yeah, I'm just thinking it's just the times and technology. And
so is it just because people couldn't get their festival gear and ASOS and like flaunt on the gram? That's the only reason that we got festivals?
I mean, I'm sure it has to do with inflation or something. Something political had to happen. You know, like we didn't have iPhones back then or something, but I'm just thinking like it is something new. I'm very curious to what people have to say in the chat and what they think.
Yeah, me too. So again, people are getting a firsthand view into how I start thinking about things when they kind of first pop in my mind. I mean, I've been thinking about music festivals and this flood of them for a while, but it wasn't until like 2 days ago that I was like, fuck, why are there so many music festivals? Like it just kind of wild because, and I'm like, it's maybe the same people for the most part.
Yeah, because I just be looking through, I'm like, no, it's not. I gotta weigh my costs because I'm not paying $300 just to see 2 artists. I need to see at least maybe like 10 on the list. That's why I'm not going to governor's ball. I don't see that many people that I'm interested in.
So, but again, so that's what happens when so many people start to feel that way. Or is there always gonna be enough of a market to where enough people are going to want to go, irrespective if there's people there they want to see?
I feel like there is. I just, you know, this generation that we're in, like image is very important, and, you know, fear of missing out on things. And then the companies are going to try to like entice people to do it, like Firefest. And you saw how that blew up.
So what you're telling me is that festivals are only concerned about, people are only concerned about the spectacle. The music is just an afterthought.
I think the music is like maybe 50% of it.
Wow, music festival where music is only about 50% of it.
And then the other 50% is just like the experience.
Yeah, so I just want to know, is this festival thing going to be something permanent, or is it just because people are itching to get out of the house? In other words, is there a music festival bubble? Is what I want to know. And if what you're saying is that some of the main reasons why people are compelled to go to them isn't necessarily because of the music, but because they are itching to get out of the house because they've been locked in for the last more or less 2 years, and because they want to take pictures and essentially flaunt on the gram. I just wonder, is there going to be enough of those people to keep this thing afloat for decades to come? Or is this just something, is it a fad? Is it a bubble? That's what I'm curious about.
I just think there's always going to be other variables besides the music.
Is a scenario where music is only 50% of what people are concerned about. Is that going to be sustainable for an entire music festival industry? Or at some point, are people going to be like, we're looking for the next new spectacle? Like, so that's what I'm curious about. I guess we won't know until like 2030, but I'm just kind of curious, like, is there enough of a market to sustain this thing for like another 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, assuming that we don't get taken over by fascist people or there's like climate destruction?
Well, do you think it's going to last?
I don't actually. I don't think it's going to last. I don't even like to make predictions. But part of the reason I don't think it's going to last is I think there's going to be oversaturation. I think part of why festivals are so popular is because since there are so many of them, they're fairly easily accessible. Like most of us now live somewhere where we could reasonably drive or get to a festival without too much travel. That wasn't true, let's say 20 years ago. But since they're not nearly as novel as they once were, I think part of the appeal, i.e., I can go to this festival that other people aren't at, take pictures of myself and then flaunt. That's not going to really have the same amount of like impact as it did 5 or 6 years ago, or even 10 years ago. And so I'm like, at some point, it's kind of be like how McDonald's became McDonald's was because for a while, McDonald's was just in a handful of places. And then they essentially turned into this big chain. And then eventually they became such a monopoly that they the thing that originally made them appealing ultimately ended up being its undoing, because once everybody had access to it, it's just like, oh, it's just whatever. It's McDonald's. Like I go to McDonald's because if there's nothing else around, but all else equal, like I'm probably going to go somewhere else. I mean, it's not quite the same because, festivals have different names and they're in different places with cities with different characteristics and stuff. But I mean, if it's going to be the case that it is essentially the same, like people are getting recycled at each one of these events with some adjustments here or there, then eventually it just, to me, it sounds like turning music festivals into chain restaurants. It's just like, but I don't know, that might be appealing to some people. Some people like chain restaurants because they know what you're getting. If you go to a music festival, the experience is pretty much the same. You get the little wristband in the mail that you don't take off. That's your souvenir. There's going to have these like step and repeats where you can take these great Instagram worthy pictures. What the stage is going to be like there's going to be a Ferris wheel, the experience itself is being packaged similar to you would a fast food joint or a chain restaurant. So part of that is like people have become accustomed to the festival going experience, and it's almost like a part of their own identity. But I just wonder if that's going to be something that is long lasting or if it's fleeting, and I guess only time will tell.
That is a very fascinating parallel that you can actually write about. You should submit that to Billboard or another music publication. Is Spin Magazine still a thing?
I think so. I'm pretty sure. Maybe Consequence of Sound or something.
That's a very fun topic. But yes, I think we've reached our time.
Right.
We can talk about this for another hour, honestly.
I know, right?
What's the book again?
Yeah, it's called The Limits of Capital. I would recommend this book if anybody just wants to understand how capitalism functions as a system. Like there's a logic to it. Like people just think it's just, I think a lot of people when they hear capitalism, they just think of like these crazy old white men in some like secret smoky room, like orchestrating how everything is going to work. But there actually is like a logic to how accumulation happens or how markets are made, and how it generates inequality, how it produces tons of wealth. Like it's actually a very readable book, especially given it's written by a geographer. So Limits of Capital.
Okay. Well, let them know where they can follow you.
Yes, I can be found at JCJAYC Tiger Fan, both at Twitter or Instagram.
And it's also his birthday today. So, I mean, if you want to put your Cash App up, you can.
Sure. I don't know about heart, but hopefully you can like flash it.
I'll put the Cash App on it. Just send it to me when I'm editing it or something. Because it's his birthday, y'all. He works hard behind the scenes. And yeah, y'all know we all can find me, CDIGGI1 on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see y'all for the next episode. Bye.